To my surprise, the female scientist's eyes went nearly as horrified as mine when 104's broken gaze fell on me, and before anything else could happen, she shouted out,
104, stop!
The little girl staggered on her feet, instantly freezing as her eyes flicked to the woman. The director just grew infuriated, his steely eyes narrowing on the woman as he hissed out,
What the hell are you doing? I'm running this operation, Dahmer. Stand down!
We have more immediate problems.
She spoke, her blue eyes flashing behind Callie and me.
Subject 12's offspring is still active. If we let it escape...
My gaze whirled around to fall upon the horrible sight of Julie's decapitated form swaying on its feet, a fragmented brain stem barely visible from within her serrated neck. What was left of her body was entirely unrecognizable as it split apart and attempted to drag itself away from the chaos. Scythe-like, bone-tipped tendrils clawed at the ground as she meandered blindly.
That is not important!
The director screamed.
Are you kidding me? The damn thing is decapitated! It barely has any matter control at all! Dr. Cleo Dahmer, you have no authority to command 104. Step aside!
Dahmer's teeth gnashed as her fists balled at her sides, her heels pivoting on the cement.
Destroy Subject 12's offspring, then finish off the other two!
The director hissed, turning back to her. 104 instantly complied, teleporting again and leaving behind pieces of herself as she erupted forwards. Misted blood doused the air and swirled back into her as her form instantly reconstructed mere feet from Julie's corpse. I watched the director's smile flash into view and my fists clenched, my blood boiling. Stay with 104, I seethed to Callie. Keep her distracted, don't let her help him. I didn't even wait for her response before my legs locked in a sprint, my eyes narrowing. The director took a step back, fear encroaching on his face as my sweeping arm came up gripping my pistol and my teeth flashed in a wide grin. One word, I screamed, closing the distance between us. One word and I'll blow your fucking brains out. His stance solidified, his fist clenching as he stood his ground, watching me approach with shaking hands. He went to speak, but I cut him off. That thing is not a parasite, I screamed. What the hell did you do to that girl? Rather than listen to his bullshit response, I fired a shot directly at his feet, barely missing, sending his heart up into his throat.
Full-on parasites can't influence each other directly,
He cried out, rage nearly overriding his fear.
They have a subconscious mental block that keeps their distortions from harming one another. A sort of empathetic feedback reaction, if you will.
Several seconds of silence ensued, until his hand softly raised the radio device. His next words seeped out into the air, chilling everything they touched.
But,
He continued, his eyes cresting with darkness.
if we destroy the part of the brain responsible for empathy,
My heart slammed against my chest.
parasite obviously attempts to repair that section of the brain.
He continued, holding up the remote.
That is why it is necessary to apply the poison continuously in small amounts. Only if the subject tries to remove it does it inject it all at once, killing the host's brain and rendering the left hand useless.
Out of the corner of my eye, I watched 104 lift her spindly hand before violently curling her fingers into a fist. Julie's body exploded in every direction, her flesh vaporizing into a red mist as a horrid black creature squirmed into view. 104's body staggered slightly before she lifted her other hand from her baggy scrubs and mimed a crushing motion. The black, wriggling parasite slowly imploded on itself, screeching with heavy distortions and thrashing violently before it flattened into a pool of black blood. So the failsafe isn't a failsafe at all, I cried, and it's not affecting the parasite. It's set to continuously inject into the human brain. My fist clenched so hard that my fingernails carved through my own skin. The parasites aren't removing the host's humanity, I continued, hissing venomously. You are.
When you destroy the basic cognitive sections of the brain responsible for empathy, speech, and emotions, you create a creature that is stupid enough to be trainable. A hideously powerful predator. And best of all, able to harm other parasites without being directly harmed itself.
My skin prickled with terror, realizing what this entailed. Callie didn't stand a chance against such a thing. If her failsafe was no longer active, she wouldn't be able to hurt 104, while that little girl would rip her limb from limb without lifting a finger. I watched the man in the military suit stand upright as his face flashed with confusion, glancing at the director, his mouth falling open.
Director,
He said firmly despite his quavering tone.
this is not what you said. If the creatures can
The
communicate...
higher-ups have all agreed that this is a necessary step in preventing the overthrow of humanity.
The director gnashed.
Fucking lowly grunt. You have no idea. If you've been led to believe they're just mindless predators, it simply means you're not worth the time.
I was sent to supervise your mission, Director.
The man spoke.
If these creatures have higher cognitive ability...
Oh, so we'll just talk to them, huh?
The director shouted through a wide smile, instantly splintering across his face as he let out a strangled laugh, grabbing the man and pulling him close.
After they've taken everything from us? This isn't what I'd expect from you, Commander, being so soft. Like I've said, we're fighting a war here. It's a fucking disguise! I won't be fooled! These are monsters, no matter how human they seem! If they get the chance to kill, they won't hesitate. They will every time!
You're a fucking liar, I screamed, my finger tightening on the trigger. That's not true!
Oh yeah?
He snapped back, violently pulling the military man in front of him as a human shield.
Out of the left hands you know, how many have killed or tried to kill those you care about?
I fired, watching the military man's face splinter apart as the bullet slammed into his skull. His body sunk in the director's arms, leaving enough room for me to fire again directly at the director's throat. Except the slide was stuck back, the weapon empty as a trigger clicked in my hand. The director's eyes were wide with horror and fear as the blood of the man ran down his suit.
Kill the boy!
He shrieked to the little girl as he staggered backwards.
104, end this!
The little girl's hideous form shattered into view in front of me. Her dark red eyes twitched within the black ring of her iris, and her white hair quavered with distortions. She hissed violently, the glowing barbed wire snaking past my feet, coiling around her and dancing through the air. Her pale hands gripped tightly down on themselves, her tiny limbs beginning to shake as her eyes landed on me.
Kill him!
The director shouted, kicking the military man's body aside and gripping the radio in his hand tightly. Something arced through the little girl's eyes, the thick sludge swirling beneath them lying stagnant as her face drained of her wild cheerfulness. My splayed-out hands slowly came to rest by my side as I watched her quavering eyes crest with confusion, pain surging through them soon after. Her hand slowly lifted to clutch her head.
104! You can do this!
The director screamed, further turning up the device. The girl just staggered on her feet as the poison ate away at her brain. Her limbs twitched and flashed pale as she refused to make any moves towards me. Callie's form encroached in my peripherals as she stopped to stand beside me. The director's eyes narrowed in rage.
You think you have me?
He shouted, a wicked grin again spreading across his face.
But you have nothing at all. We've only ever seen one before. A male infection. A terrible fate to suffer. I almost pity you, boy.
A deranged laugh racked his body as he continued.
I want you to know that if you're somehow justifying this to yourself, how much of a murderer you've become, by blaming the parasites, you can forget about it. Our military friend was correct. There is no such thing as a male infection. If there is a parasite inside of you, it's not truly attached to your spine or influencing your thoughts. It's simply multiplying.
My blood curdled with horror at his words.
The poison has been unable to remove 104's common sense against killing her own children, apparently.
He grinned.
But it's no matter.
His glasses flashed in the night.
You'll be dead soon anyway.
Her children.
Piece of shit.
The director sighed at 104, his eyes narrowing.
Spreading her kind like a fucking disease rather than accomplishing her assigned task. Slaughtering our team and forcing us to wait for her dormant phase to pass again before she was of any use. Thanks to you, John. We finally understand what's been happening all along.
My heart stopped. That's what the scientist woman, Dr. Cleo Dahmer, had meant at the hospital. During the gaps in my memory, that day absent from my mind, the militia must have reached my house with 104, but rather than killing Callie in her unconscious state like she was supposed to,
We have learned that the parasite splits off a part of itself in order to ensure its survival.
Dahmer said.
It then injects itself into a new host, shutting itself down into a short-lived dormant stage. This allows it time to recover its lost information. During this state, the parasite is extremely vulnerable.
That's why,
The director filled in.
when choosing to reproduce, it kills everyone around it, eliminates any threats. That is,
His eyes flashed to Julie's gory mess on the ground.
everyone except for one. It destroys all potential threats in the area before reproducing its kind in a new host. In our unfortunate case, that meant she slaughtered our militia sent to kill Subject 12. Even took out a helicopter while she was at it.
My eyes widened.
Some moron dialed back her failsafe too far.
The director spat.
Allowed her to reconstruct her brain enough to wonder why she was listening to us. I should have been the one to head that mission. 104's parasite is too strong. Her healing capabilities are like something out of a nightmare.
Prior to this,
Dahmer continued.
the state following the injection into a new host was simply known as the dormant phase, a vulnerable time with nothing known about what caused it other than the fact that it almost always followed an awakening. It was during this short and precious interval of time that we were able to fit the host with fail-safe mechanisms.
We thought this allowed us to get an edge on the parasites.
The director spat.
But all along we were missing countless others being born. Females injected with a parasite become fully functioning left hands within not but a few years. Much faster than those born with an infantile parasite. Injected males become breeding farms for them, ticking time bombs for mass infection when the parasites multiply beyond capacity.
His eyes narrowed further.
That means, of course,
He hissed.
you're a risk to everyone around you. If they're already deflecting bullet fire from themselves, you haven't got long. Do the right thing.
I looked at 104 standing in front of me now, her eyes squirming behind pools of blood. Her pale skin shifted as she gazed at me, flashing red and blue in the night. Her white hair meandered around aimlessly, her scrubs stained with blood and flesh fragments. My eyes narrowed on the director and the device gripped in his hand, the output level nearly at full capacity to keep 104 in this horrid state of insanity. Callie's chains raced into the air, but a glance from 104 left her to halt in her tracks, her teeth clenching. What the hell? I hissed at the director. Just what the hell did the parasites do to you? He just slowly raised his hand, gesturing to the militia all around him. What the fuck happened to you? I shrieked. This isn't a war you're fighting, this is some insane personal obsession. Just what are you so afraid of? His teeth flashed in the night, a wicked smile splitting across his face as the guns trained on me. Dahmer met my gaze, gesturing to something and winking before turning around to follow the director, her heels clacking in confident strides. It wasn't long before she split off in the opposite direction as the director, getting as far away as possible from the militia, her red dress billowing in the wind. The mounted machine guns glinted in the night, the sound of readjusting metal clanking through the surrounding crowd as they positioned themselves behind riot shields. 104 remained in front of us, her form ominously stagnant despite the way it churned with sporadic skin waves.
You were injected by 104 less than a day ago.
The director grinned at me from afar.
Your projectile capacity is likely only a few hundred rounds per second. If that.
His fingers closed up into a fist as he began backing away.
It was nice knowing you, John. Just know that I'm doing you a favor. By the looks of your infection, you won't last another 10 minutes.
My eyes trained on Callie, my voice quietly crawling out before I turned back to the director. "Who did you lose?" I screamed, noting that he flinched at this. "This is a revenge quest. No other situation would make you so utterly blind to the truth. You know full well how human these parasites are. You're not saving anyone. You're a murderer." His eyes burned in the darkness, spit flying from his mouth as he snapped.
You don't know anything about me. 104.
He continued as he slipped behind the militia.
Get out of here.
104 instantly exploded from in front of us, teleporting out of the way and reappearing beside the lines of people that suddenly stepped forwards, raising their weapons in unison. "They become the person," I cried. "They don't kill the host. They adopt their traits. They have their memories and personality. Director, the host is never truly gone."
Shut your mouth!
He screamed, his glasses flashing.
Don't you tell me that she isn't gone! Look at her for fuck's sake!
My eyes widened, my blood corroding with icy sludge. Any words caught in my windpipe as horror spread across my face. My eyes flicked to the director, disbelief eating my features away before I slowly turned back to look at the girl standing on spindly, pale legs, her big red eyes sickly and broken. Her body barely breathed as flesh crawled around her scrubs like ants. The way the director had held her hand, the way he ordered her to safety. "Director," I stammered. "Subject 104. Don't tell me that's your daughter."
Fire!
He shouted, slashing his hand downwards in a violent rage. My breath caught, my heart stopping instantly as my hand clasped around Callie's. The air exploded with countless percussive shockwaves, my surroundings slashing apart with streaks of blistering lead. I felt my skin split from my body with the sheer heat of my surroundings, my bones shattering and heaving up through my muscles as my body unraveled in front of me. Or, that's what it looked and felt like to me at least. But when the dust settled and the night went eerily still, it became clear that it only appeared this way due to the massive distortion surrounding me. I hadn't been touched. My breathing was heavy, my feet wedged within a small crater of asphalt around my form.
Male parasitic infections have a much higher defense.
The director gnashed, angry that the militia had stopped after the bullet came splintering back to them, embedding in the glass of their riot shields.
The infection has progressed much further than we thought. The parasites don't fuse to the brain stem. The host has no offensive capabilities of conscious control over the left hands. Just keep firing! Inducing scatter protocol will kill the host.
My heart decayed with a flash of frost, my limbs seizing up. I'm not sure how true that is, I stammered, nervously looking around the faces ready to tear me apart at the director's signal. The whole not being able to distort matter thing, I think I may have been able to work something out. The director's eyes narrowed on me from afar. Callie's hand tightened around mine. Callie could have just torn you apart with distortions as soon as you stepped away from 104. I nervously stammered again. I told her not to, though. I thought it would be more fitting for you if you brought on your own demise. If Callie only distorted something really tiny, something to start a chain of events, Something small and simple, like turning down the dial on a remote injection device. The director's eyes snapped open in horror, his hand thrashing the device up to his face in panic. By the time his other hand rushed forwards to turn it back up, it was too late. 104 erupted from nowhere, her body inches from his, cleaving his hand from his arm in one fluid motion. The director screamed in agony as the militia scrambled, turning their sights on 104 within seconds. Another man, obviously second in command, rapidly counted down from 3, but before he reached 0, the director's voice rang out.
No! Don't shoot!
The militia froze, unsure what to do with this order. The director's body fell to the ground, scrambling backwards from the little girl whose violent distortions vaporized the radio device underfoot as she walked past it. Razor wire snaked around like an angry serpent, attempting to wrap around his body, slashing his legs to shreds as he tried to wiggle free. His amputated limb gushed hot red blood, and he was growing paler by the second. The other man began counting down for the second time, but the director again screamed in protest at the last second.
Don't kill her!
He screamed, tears and blood running down his face, his glasses shattering with distortions as she began to peel his skin away.
Please.
He wheezed, the metal beginning to slice into his chest, leaving his words to bubble from his lips with blood.
Just don't kill her.
The militia instantly disobeyed his order, counting down from 3 before firing at her spindly form in unison, the night shattering apart with the sheer noise of the blasts. 104's grin slashed into view, her body exploding before a single slug could even reach her. As she reappeared within the ranks of the militia, evaporated blood boiled into the air as barbed wire hacked in large circles around her, distorted air going off like a massive bomb. I went to back up, only to feel my insides shift with unimaginable pain, my limbs instantly seizing up and leaving me to crash to the asphalt. Callie rushed to kneel down, her green eyes ripe with horror, her pale limbs splayed out in fear. I writhed in agony, vaguely aware that the red in my vision was in part due to the sheer amount of pain and partly due to the physical blood that had begun to slosh around with every blink of my eyes. This was it. Just as the director had said, 104's copies were going to kill me when they multiplied beyond capacity. I imagined them using my own flesh to inject themselves into the panicked people now scattering like flies around me. Callie's chain suddenly slashed into the air, her eyes narrowing in intense focus as she raised one chain tendril to her eye line. I knew what she was trying to do. It's too late, I cringed out, forcing a smile onto my pale face, trying to wipe the blood from my eyes so I could at least see her properly. You can't cut them out without killing me. I'm sorry, Callie. Earlier today, the doctors admitted that performing even an incredibly delicate surgery would likely result in my death. She didn't even verbally acknowledge this, but her chain began to rattle violently as her eyes narrowed more, her teeth gritting. Please, Callie, I smiled. There's nothing you can do. Please, just listen to me. Her chain began to spark. It had gone so hot, vibrating so fast it looked to be a glowing blur. If people were judged for the rest of their lives for things they did back in 8th grade, I coughed, black blood spewing from my mouth. That would be super shitty. Her lids went wide, her chain losing intensity as tears glossed her eyes. I grunted to sit upright, the pain coming in massive waves. I'm pretty delirious at the moment, I stammered. But the point is, I don't really know. I managed to get back to my feet, my insides shifting and the world spiraling out of control. Callie's face looked on in horror as she ran to steady me. I imagined this would play out differently. I laughed, stumbling slightly. I really should have some last words to say, some cliche way to express the weird amount I care about you, but My bleary eyes slowly came to focus on a form emerging from the crowd of gunfire. His glasses were no longer on his blood-splattered face, but I saw his gangly form staggering towards me on shredded legs, blood painting the ground like sludge as he stumbled. A gun glinted in the light, barely gripped in his right hand. I tried to scramble back in panic, nearly toppling Callie over. She saw him approaching, and her emerald green eyes narrowed into black discs within her lids.
John,
The director spoke, his voice panicked and faint.
you have to before. You're the only one. You're the only one 104 won't kill.
Callie went to hack him apart, her chains slicing into the air, but as his eyes flicked to her, she hesitated, returning his gaze.
She won't risk harming her children.
He continued, turning back to me, light blood coming from his mouth.
You're the only one who can get close enough.
He held out the gun with quaking hands, his sticky blood painting the handle.
You have to.
He continued.
You don't understand how strong she is. When she turned on us last time, the vice was still at over half capacity. When you turned it off completely, that's all the time it needed. You think we would only leave one fail-safe transceiver? Oh, mine was destroyed. Someone set the kill code as soon as you said something. The fact that she's still alive means that the left hand has denatured the poison, rearranged the very molecular structure into something harmless. Nothing will ever keep her under control again. You have to place this gun to her temple and pull the trigger. We can't be certain it'll work, even at that close a range. But it's all we can try.
I looked at the gun extended towards me. The director staggered on his feet. His eyes were a horrid dull gray against his soaked red skin, and they flashed with a sorrow I had yet to see.
John, those who end up working for this agency, it's always for personal reasons. I don't need to tell you what killed my wife long ago. You're smart. We never had a chance at kids. 104 isn't my biological daughter. I treated her like one. I oversaw her as a baby before I became a director. Supervised the artificially accelerated parasitic growth. Implanted as a fully formed specimen. Her father was a cruel man. To offer her up for such a horrid cause, abandon her to a fate like this, I had to be the one to try to protect her. She needed someone to be there for her. You may think the girl beside you isn't bad. And while you may hold on to the hope that the goodness in them will prevail, I assure you that the parasites are nothing but pure evil. The humanity within them is nothing but a trait adopted from the host. A shallow copy of what makes people like you and me human. You can hope that what they display is something more than that. But I'm not so sure. She was beautiful. 104. The prettiest baby I had ever seen. The first year of her life in that facility. She was everything anyone could have asked for in this world. But as soon as we introduced that horrid thing, she changed. Children take years to learn to be human. Learn what's right and wrong. How to smile. How to laugh. We stole that from her. There was barely any human personality for the parasite to adopt. No carbon copy to create. All that exists within that girl is the left hand. Uncontaminated and fully itself. And it is evil, John. The purest, most basic form of the darkness in this world. If you can tell me that you trust something with such pure and base instincts at its foundation, if you can trust that someone with every tool to carry out destruction will never act on it, then that's your choice. But humanity cannot afford to follow you.
The gun felt warm in my tightening fingers as screams rang out and I heard the telltale hissing laughter I had come to so easily associate with the parasites. 104's little form barely retained any consistent shape as it splintered in every direction, laying waste to anyone in her path.
I'm sorry to ask this of you,
the director continued.
But you must understand that you will die in a matter of minutes anyway. Once her young are fully formed, we will have absolutely no way to stop her. This is truly our last chance.
You'll give Callie another chance, I spoke, not even awaiting a confirmation before stumbling forwards. Callie's hand gripped harder around my shoulder before clawing in desperation as I walked away, the gun shaking in my grip.
John?
She screamed, tears bursting forth as she rushed in front of me.
You can't!
Her eyes were wide in panic and horror, but I lightly put up my arm, watching her distortions part around me as my hand rested on her shoulder. No, I spoke softly, my voice shaking as my lungs began to fill with heavy blood. You can't. She can kill you. This is all I can do to stop that if I'm going to die. I might as well, huh? I paused for a second, queasiness taking my heart as I stole a glance at her lips and laughed out. A bit cliché to do it now, huh? I guess I missed my chance. Her face erupted in red. It's nothing, I cringed. It just would have been kinda nice to... Her body exploded, ropey strands of flesh lashing at my face as blood enveloped the scene. My eyes widened into glossy spheres as what was left of her corpse tumbled across the pavement. Her metal, glistening chains splintered into crystalline fragments as they were torn from her charred corpse and skidded across the ground. Militia members rushed past in slow motion, the hot air crawling with unnatural wind as I turned to see 104 standing several feet away, quickly lifting her hand to crush what was left of Callie. I trained my sights on her without a second thought and slammed the trigger back. The bullet erupted forwards, deflecting off her form instantly, splintering into view inches from my own face before it was deflected back again. The bullet accelerated with each repercussion between the two of us, becoming a white-hot ball of plasma before vaporizing into a mist. 104 stopped moving. Her eyes glanced at me, her body slowly turning to face me. Her white hair danced lightly, getting caught in her mouth, still split open in a wild smile. I walked headlong towards her, not slowing my pace. 104 went to turn away, but I slammed the trigger back again, barely flinching as the screaming metal shook the air, violently tearing itself apart in between us. She turned towards me again, her red eyes staying with me this time around, not narrowing, but rather looking up at my face. Her smile slowly dissolved as I approached. I pulled the trigger again, watching her eyes not even blink as the round shattered in front of her face. Blood swam in my vision. I was sure my eyes were just as crimson as hers, my skin just as pale and ghastly. My strides were uneven and staggering, but I reached her in no time, her tiny form standing its ground. Her razor wire lay on the ground, stagnant and cold. The gun had fallen to my side as I now stood but a foot in front of her. People ran in terror all around me, random shots occasionally splintering around us in a dance of blinding light. The weapon in my hand bared intense weight as I slowly lifted it from my hip. 104's eyes glistened with horrid red blood, her hair mangled and frayed, her hands so pale and fragile by her side that my heart squirmed. I could do this. I knew full well this was merely the corpse of a girl. Her mind was nothing but what this creature had made of it after all these years. In a sense, she had never really existed at all. I wasn't killing her. This wasn't even a her, just an it. My teeth gritted, the weapon halting halfway to her form. I wasn't even sure if I had the strength to lift the gun. The world was swimming violently, my insides churning like a vat of rolling slag. At great length, the weapon landed at her head level, and she didn't even flinch as I pressed the metal against her skull. Unexpected tears mixed with the blood obscuring my vision, and I felt my hand begin to shake even more violently. I wouldn't believe this. There wasn't such a thing as true evil. If this thing, even if it wasn't human or even close, if it was as smart as one, there was no way it could be the mindless monster. My hand exploded, the air shattering with a violent distortion as 104 cleaved the weapon to the ground. Her eyes looked at me unemotionally, falling away to the ground as her body turned around and began walking away. I stared at the gun on the ground, my irises shaking as its form blurred in my vision. I had pulled the trigger. But the slide was jerked back, the cartridge jammed in the ejection port. She had stopped it. My flesh wound together in front of me, a crude imitation of a fleshy hand squirming with distortions before beginning to take on a more convincing shape. Then a shot. I whirled around to watch the director's body stagger back, his pained eyes going wide with horror. Standing in front of him was Dahmer, a twisted smile on her face, her coat billowing in the heavy wind. Her crimson dress warped in the foul air. She lifted the gun again, her hideous smile growing as she pulled the trigger without hesitation. The director dropped like a rock, his form slamming to the asphalt, his skull ruptured outwards from the point-blank shot. Dahmer laughed.
104, come here!
104 suddenly exploded, her form reappearing in front of the woman.
Take care of the rest of them,
Dahmer continued.
It's time we ended this.
104 suddenly erupted into a fury again, a grin splitting across her face and the hissing laughter rushing forth as she ripped the now fleeing people apart. My confusion instantly turned to rage, and I yanked the cartridge from the gun, cocking it and rushing forwards. Before I could take more than a few strides, however, my limbs failed me again and I rolled across the ground, damp with blood. I held onto the gun as I splintered across the asphalt, but I barely had time to aim it in the woman's direction before her cherry red heel came down on my hand and slammed my wrist to the ground. She effortlessly knocked the firearm aside before she kicked across my chest to roll me onto my back.
You hardly have time to be engaging in such ruthless antics,
she scolded, towering above me.
If I were you, I'd be worried about my own well-being.
I coughed out blood, my vision utterly dark, lights leaving trails in my vision. Distortions splintered out from my shifting skin, and I watched my own flesh begin to bubble with heat.
We can save you, John,
she continued, smiling.
I can save you. We can get those things out of you. The director, though, is quite a liar, an incompetent leader from the beginning. You should just be glad that I'm taking over after his unfortunate demise. You are not doomed. 104 is more beautiful than ever. And just because she doesn't listen to him, doesn't mean that there aren't ways to make her obey.
Her shiny, curly red hair meandered in the wind as she leaned down to approach my face.
You are better off with us, John.
She grinned, holding out her hand.
You are better off with me. I already told you that I'm the one who kept Callie alive. I believe I've told you before. We are the future. I have no intention of repressing what these wondrous creatures can do. It's such a shame that Callie's offspring had to be killed. I like the way that left hand specialized. It's no matter though. There are more left hands where that came from. Come to our facility. I can fix you.
John, no.
Callie cried out, her hideous form a gangly mess as it writhed on the ground.
Don't listen.
Don't. I coughed, utterly blind as blood swirled in my irises. Don't hurt Callie. Let her go.
No can do.
She smiled, her hand brushing across my face.
You've got no right to be making demands. I'm the one helping you. But, tell you what, come with me, and I'll give your monster friend a 48-hour head start.
My skin shifted, the air around me flowing with distortive air. Even if I don't survive, I rasped out, lifting my hand into the air blindly.
Yes.
She grinned.
Even if you don't survive.
No.
Callie shrieked in desperation.
You can't. You have no idea.
Deal. I wheezed, feeling her cold hand wrap around mine.
You and I, John?
She grinned through the enveloping darkness.
Together we're going to change the world.
Everything went dead.
104.
Dahmer continued.
Kill Subject 12.
Thoughts and memories of my life are leaving me into eternity.
I cannot possibly thank all of you wonderful people enough for supporting this series. Every comment means more than you know, and just hearing that a handful of people really enjoy it is enough to make me feel like what I'm doing is kind of worthwhile, and that's a really good feeling. And thank you so freaking much to all of the voice actors who helped me out this season. You guys are incredible and really put up with all of my bullshit, like continuously rewriting the story or cutting or adding parts. It was an honor to work with all of you, and I hope the final product turned out to be something meaningful.